Are you curious what options and features you get in an Anthem AVM70? Let's take a look through the entire stock UI and see what we find. So my home theater and overall AV system upgrade continues. I've got the AVM70 in hand. I haven't actually installed it yet, but I have it just basically plugged in, powered on, nothing connected except the power cord and an Ethernet cable, so that we can take a look at the UI, see what kind of settings and options and capabilities and all of that stuff is in here. I can't wait to dive in. I'll probably follow up this video with one where I actually go through the process of setting up how I want to use the AVM70, setting it up for my system, of course getting it installed and fully connected in my rack. All that stuff is coming. But if you're thinking about this preamp, and I spent a long time debating this one versus Arkham and a couple of other options, and hopefully this video will give you an idea of what this thing is capable of, a little bit about how it works and so on. So let's take a look through it together. And right off the bat, this is almost the same UI as the MRX receiver, the 540 that I set up for my friend, with a couple of extra options, a couple of extra expansions and so on, because it of course has a processor and as a more powerful model, it has some more features and capabilities and that sort of thing. So it navigates on the left hand side there. We're going to just start at the top and we'll work our way down. I'm already selected into that first option, which is essentially the information and the status page. You can see it highlighted blue there. So we see a picture of our AVM70. I thought maybe this was kind of a real-time display when I did the MRX overview, but as it turns out, I don't think it is. It's just static minus 35. That would have been pretty cool if that actually showed you what was being shown on the interface on the device, but so be it. So we have a model AVM70 here in this information tab. Serial number, I am on software release 1.104.144. I do understand the beta is a little bit ahead of that. It's like 1.104.150 something. I did not enable beta updates. I have updated this to the latest general release software, firmware, but I didn't enable the betas. I'm not sure if this is a device yet that I'm comfortable being on the beta track like I am with pretty much everything else I own. So we'll see. But we are updated to the latest general release 1.104.144. There's a couple of extra version numbers there. I'm not sure why we're getting 0 numbers for the DSP and the LCDC. So be it. Software build date June 30th. That is a little bit long for a general release software update. It's almost 6 months. Is quite a while. Hardware version 2, I don't know what that actually represents or what different variations there have been in the AVM70 from hardware 1 to hardware 2. Conceivably hardware 3 would represent a model that's going to come with HDMI 2.1, but in any case, this is a hardware version 2. I did purchase this brand new from a local authorized dealer who happened to have it in stock just after Christmas time. US region, device name, that's configurable. Just the name that the device represents for itself. ARC upload date and ARC name. So of course I haven't done anything, no configuration for any of the settings, let alone getting into ARC yet. So there's no ARC modules or no ARC information set in this unit yet. Network module, hardware version 1. We have our Wi-Fi and our Ethernet MAC addresses. Right now I am plugged in via wired Ethernet, and of course network status as well as just reflective there of the IP address that my router gave it. System status down below here. If I did have an active input turned on and the system was the preamp was getting a signal and outputting a signal and processing and so on, then this would fill in with requisite information about what was active at the moment. There is nothing connected, there is no active signal, so that's blank. And then we have a user interface, the web UI version with what we have here. And by the way, I am taking a look at this in Safari, website version 0.5.34. Now, one thing I'll note pretty quickly, that bottom right hand corner, command error, do it again, EZ1 AIR question mark. I never like to see a brand new, expensive, and awesome piece of electronics that I was excited about throw me some kind of an error before I even really begun using it. I haven't looked that up yet. I'm not sure what exactly that refers to. I'm going to hold out hope that it's because I'm clicking on things and I'm interfacing and I'm not really connected to anything, the device isn't really fully set up yet. If that persists after setup, then certainly I'll be digging into and trying to figure out what exactly the Easy One AIR is. If you happen to know you have one of these and you're watching, let me know in the comments. Curious to make that go away. Again, it's never fun to see a brand new expensive piece of electronics giving you a problem like that. So under the information banner, we have two entries here, quick access, one for the main zone and one for zone 2. Of course, this is a big departure from the MRX 540 that I took a look at, which didn't have a zone 2, it was only a main zone. This is a multi-zone processor. One of the things I'll note as well is you can't really interrogate many of the settings when the zone is off. Notice there's a lot of grayed outness here. You can see the circle with the slash in it. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn the main zone on, which is going to enable us to actually interact with a lot more of the settings throughout the rest of the unit. So very iPhone-ish, very contemporary. I like this UI, by default quite a bit in terms of how they've done it, the way they segmented the different boxes into areas, and the way the controls work and that sort of thing. So in our main zone here, quick access controls, we can mute, we can change the volume, we can adjust the power on volume, and we can adjust the maximum volume. So you can manage your power limits for the zone right here. We have an indication of the current input, and of course if I selected a different one, that would physically change the currently active input on the device, since this is the access, the status zone. I can set a power on input to something specific or just the last used. Current audio mode to control what type of mixing or processing might be being applied to the current audio input. There is no audio input, so there's no mixing going on right now. And then we have an option here, default streaming zone. Activates, deactivates the main zone as the default streaming zone. I'm not sure what that means exactly. That might have something to do, I suspect, if you try to AirPlay or cast to the device, which zone it's actually going to route to. And if I take a quick look over in the zone 2 settings, it's very similar. There also is a default streaming zone here. Of course, since the one in the main zone is enabled, the one in the zone 2 is disabled. And then we have individual level controls for our sound. We can adjust balance between the left and the right channels, treble and bass adjustments, all of it defaulted to just 0. And then, of course, all of the different speakers that the preamp is possible of processing, and quick access to individual level controls for each of those channels. Front, front wide, center, surround, surround back. The subwoofers, a separate line for LFE, interesting. And then 3 in-ceiling speaker options as well. This is a 15.2 channel processor. So zone 2 quick access, very, very similar to the main zone. You just really don't get the level control. So we can control power. We'll go ahead and just turn it on. We have the ability to mute, same volume, same power on and maximum volume options. We can specify a current input as well as a power on input. And again, that default streaming zone option, which is actually pretty cool. I could conceivably see when I do set this thing up, leveraging zone 2 as the default streaming zone, because my main zone is going to be my theater, my basement room. It's really not the zone that we spend the most time in. And if somebody were to cast a song or do something like that to the processor, by default, we're really going to want it to go to the living room, to the zone 2. So that's a pretty nice option there. Right. In detailed system setup, we'll start here with general, 4 different blocks here. First one is general settings. I can modify the device name. I probably will change that. I don't know what the 42166A comes from. Maybe it's part of the serial number or something. We can set the menu language, distance units, feet or meters, of course, master volume scale in decibels or percent. I tend to usually use decibels. Standby HDMI bypass selects the input that will pass through the unit while it is off directly to the display. I don't generally use that, although maybe in some cases if you don't want to use your audio system and you just want to have your TV do everything, right? That's what you would use that for. Favor current streaming input. Activates, deactivates favoring of the current streaming input. I don't know exactly what that means. I'll have to take a look at that. It's on by default, as we see. And then connected standby, you're just generally going to want to leave on. The unit will consume more power, but it will keep networking commands awake and ready to receive commands. So if you want to be able to turn this thing on via web, via control system, always be able to access it, whatever, of course you're going to want to use connected standby. Here we have a little bit more advanced mute controls. For example, are you muting all the way to silent, or does mute just go to some other type of fixed level? We have a couple options here: mute line out and mute digital out when selecting, and our options represent any of those inputs. So it says mute the line input that is connected to a recording device to prevent feedback from its output to its input. So you can do that both for, I guess, an analogish or a single source or a specific digital input as well. I'm not going to redo and relay any recording. It's probably a feature I'll never take a look at. And then we have an option here for headphones, mute main outputs. Mute the main speakers, of course. So if you plug in headphones to the front with this feature turned on, as it is by default, playback to the regular speakers will cease and everything will get directed to your headphones. Handful of options in the upper right here for the display. No signal power off can be set over a couple different ranges of time, or never if you just want it on all the time, or you want its power state to just be managed by a control system. Front panel displayed info can be all or volume only if you want to reduce the amount of information that's physically shown on the front of the unit. Most of this stuff won't affect me. I'll be having my AVM70 away with my rack in my storage room, so it's not in my theater space, nor is it in my living room space. Front panel brightness is a slider. Default here at 3%, it's pretty dim. Wake up brightness selects the brightness of the front panel after button has been pressed. So as you interact with the unit, you can have it go brighter than it would fall back to on a normal state. That's kind of nice if you are making a change. You want to look at the front of the unit, verify, okay, did I go to the right input? What's my current volume? Something like that. You can get your feedback at a higher level of brightness that you can configure, and then after conceivably some amount of time, it's going to drop back down to the normal brightness setting. And the pretty dim one, become more unobtrusive, get out of your way, and let you enjoy your brighter content up on your screen. On-screen display info can be set to off, 16:9 or 241, so that'll impact the way the on-screen information is presented, tailoring to the type of screen size and such that you have. And here you can also send on-screen information to either both zones, the main zone only, or turn it off entirely. I really do like that. Based on my research, very few units tend to send any OSD type of information to the additional zones or to a second HDMI zone or whatnot. Really glad, really cool that they did that in here. I do like to see the information on the screen when I change volume, change inputs, whatever, get that confirmation, because again, at least for me, the unit is away. It's down in a basement. I'm not looking at it. So last settings here in general is for CEC. Of course, that's HDMI control. It is off by default. You can enable it. You can enable power control, and you can enable HDMI audio to TV. Not a ton of options there. Let's just take a look and see. It doesn't expand, so there's not additional settings buried. All right, let's take a look at speakers. So right off the bat, speaker setup. First thing we have here is our 3D sound settings. So again, 15.2 channel processor. It'll process basically 9 bed layer speakers and up to 6 immersive speakers, overhead heights, etc. And so we have 3 pairs for the 6 speakers, height 1, height 2, and height 3, as they're labeled on the back of the unit. And you have complete control here over what specific placements you might have, giving you options for in-ceiling, Dolby, which is indicative of the bounce, bounce the signal off of the ceiling. So front Dolby, middle Dolby, back Dolby, front in ceiling, middle in ceiling, back in ceiling, and then on wall, front, middle, and back as well. So if you have a mix of things, maybe you have some front heights, some top middles, and some rear heights, you would be able to accomplish that with the setting options available in this processor. I'll be using 4 speakers overhead, and I'll basically have a front in ceiling and a back in ceiling, no middles. There are 4 profiles for different speaker setups, which is great. And as we'll see, you can map these profiles to specific inputs with the whole virtual input setup. This is really where the power of the Anthem devices comes into play. And I have to say, I think this is really cool. I'm looking forward to playing with and experimenting with some of these. So the profiles, they actually all present the same way. They're numbered, profile 1 to 4 by default. You can change the name, which is great. I love UIs that let me customize things, change the names of inputs, let me tailor stuff to what I want to call it, so when I see it and when I reference it in the menus or in the interfaces in the apps and so on, it's logical, it's what I understand for my system use and that sort of thing. Calibration level, adjust Dolby offset calibration level, some level slider there, test noise for sending some peak noise to different speakers and so on. So by default, this thing comes basically fully configured. It's kind of expecting just about everything to be used in the system. And there's different blocks here for each basically speaker or pairs of speakers that you might have in your system. So the first block here is subwoofers. Number available. Interestingly, this goes to 4. Command handler error if I try to set it to 4 subwoofers. It's not actually letting me change it. So yeah, I wouldn't have expected to see 4 subwoofers on an AVM70. The AVM70 is capable of independently measuring and calibrating and managing 2 subwoofers. The AVM90 will handle 4, so there's obviously a UI bug here. You shouldn't even be able to select this. It should just give you none 1 and 2 by virtue of this being an AVM70. In any case, we are able to set distance, level, phase, and so on for our subwoofers. Conceivably, we would be able to do this independently. So settings for subwoofer 1, settings for subwoofer 2. Okay, so that's likely what we're getting there. And then polarity, normal versus inverted. There are independent crossovers for each of the speaker sets. Not the individual speakers themselves, of course, but the individuals and the pairs. We can set a front crossover, front wide, center, and so on. And we have an option for super sub fronts, which I expect is the double bass setting of the AVM70. Full frequency range stereo is fed to the front left and right channels, and bass is sent to the subwoofer. In this case, the low frequency information is effectively doubled, which may result in unpredictable and colored low frequency reproduction. But in some settings, double bass actually makes a lot of sense. It might be something that you want to use, so it's there for your front mains. We do get crossover settings available from off if you want to run the speaker as large. There's really no designation of large and small, but full range versus crossover. You can specify the speakers as full range. We can cut all the way down to 40, all the way up to 200 in 10 hertz increments. I might have liked maybe to see 5 hertz increments in there, but such it is, 10 hertz increments. And then we have the individual controls for each of the speakers. So for essentially each speaker, we have distance and level. When the speaker group is represented by a pair, you have fronts, you have a left and a right. They're independent. For the center, we have 1. Everything else is, of course, essentially a pair. And you can choose to enable or disable which specific speakers are in your setup. And of course, the immersive ones are shown there as well. Pretty cool. I like the look of the sliders. It might be nice if you could actually type in in order to get somewhere specific, but you do have the ability to tap, which is actually changing by 2 inches, not 1 inch. But I'm sure that's enough granularity for most systems. One thing to point out, because it was a question at least that I had for Anthem, and one incarnation of my home theater 2.0 adjustments and wrangling, something that I had actually considered was not using 2 speakers for the surround back. Instead, maybe just using 1. However, the Anthem receivers, the Anthem processors won't actually let you do that. As you can see, every speaker position, or every speaker group essentially, aside from the center, is fixed as a pair. And there's no option here in the surround back to designate a single versus a pair. If you need it, don't buy an Anthem, I guess. So that's the profiles, the speaker setup. So one of the ways that you might want to use this, of course, would be to to experiment with your system. Maybe you make a main profile that has all your speakers and the overheads and everything. Maybe you set up a profile that doesn't have Dolby Atmos in it and it's just the bed layers, or you have just a 2-channel speaker profile amongst your larger multi-channel system as well. Lots of different reasons why you might want to take advantage of that and do something with those profiles, and then of course mapping them here to the virtual inputs. So this is the input setup page. There are a variety of inputs defined by default: 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, looks like 16 of them, 14 of them, sorry. One for each HDMI, 7 HDMI inputs, as well as the audio return channel and various streaming and digital and analog and such type of inputs. So now you can add inputs. You can choose where you want them to be inserted when you create them. I believe you can have 30, up to 30 virtual inputs on an Anthem device like this. And again, the idea of the virtual input is so cool. It's something that I'll go into in future, but the high level value that I understand that you can get out of something like that is, let's say you have an Apple TV and you're watching movies on it and iTunes and Netflix and so on with Atmos and multi-channel audio and all of that. But then you also use it for Apple Music, and you want to be able to have an Apple TV multi-channel input designated to the HDMI and so on connections that go with that, and a multi-channel speaker profile. You can do that. Then you can create a second Apple TV stereo type of virtual input that you could have mapped to a second speaker profile that may just contain your mains or your mains and your subs, and be able to flip between those two and very easily get options between multi-channel system playback and stereo system playback and that sort of thing. Really neat. So for any given input, we can define its name. Again, love that. We can define what video input it maps to, if any, what audio input it maps to, if any. Here's where you choose the speaker profile that goes with it. You can designate various modes for mono, stereo, and multi-channel sources, input sources, signal sources. Convert analog, either convert to 192 or no. Activate deactivates the inputs, convert analog. You can designate whether Anthem room correction is applied. So maybe you want that stereo Apple Music, Apple TV, 2-channel profile not to use ARC. You just want it to be kind of a pure direct mode. You can accomplish that, but then you can have ARC having fully EQ'd all of your speakers for the regular multi-channel movie watching and stuff. Again, very powerful, pretty neat set of capabilities here. Dolby Audio post-processing, select the type of Dolby Audio post-processing. We can do none or music movie night modes, lip sync delay, input trim, and rumble filter. Adjust the rumble filter on or off. So there we go. That's the designations or the setup for a given input. Again, as you can see, there's quite a few. They're all the same settings, and they're designated for their different purposes. So first thing I'll be doing when I set this up for myself is blowing out all the inputs that I know I'm not going to use, and then I will custom tailor at least my 7 HDMI inputs for my 7 source devices that this processor for me is going to be managing in the main zone, theater, and then of course to the zone 2. Second to last, we have the network. There's a couple more things than just network in here as well. So there is the main network interface here, TCP port, transmit status. You can enable or disable the IR controls. There is front and rear IR, and there is an option here for a trigger delay. Selects the trigger delay duration. I can't stand when. I love the fact that they have the pop-up help on a given item, but as somebody that designs GUIs or leads some engineering team that designs tool interfaces and that sort of thing, you never put the text of the control as the explanation in the pop-up window. Come on, Anthem, give me a sentence or two. Tell me about it. What exactly am I doing it? What am I doing with this? Why would I want to change it? Give me some information. Don't make me have to go to the manual. Pop-up help like this is so valuable. But again, you got to write something like this. You got to write a sentence. Tell me what it is. Tell me why I would change it, and give me an idea what the different values mean. As it is, this only has 2 different options. I presume that means from powering on the processor to the trigger signals being sent out to power subwoofers or amplifiers and that sort of thing. It can be an instantaneous trigger, or it can have a 250 millisecond delay. That's what I presume here, but I guess we'll see as we get further into actually using this thing. IP status, this is just information as I'm on Ethernet. I'm on DHCP for right now. I do use static IPs for devices like this in my network, and I will end up switching this over to a static IP also, reliably accessible, via the network. I don't want DHCP to end up changing this on me at some point, and then I don't know what the IP address is, so I got to go log into my router and find it, that sort of thing. Ethernet configuration, it is on auto. You have the ability to switch over to manual. Hardware assist, request WPS, that's for the automatic wireless security sharing and so on. I don't really recommend that you use that. And then down below here, of course, is our 3 triggers. So the Anthem AVM70 has 3 independent 12-volt triggers. Perfect for my system. I'm actually going to be using all 3, at least in my setup right now. I'll be triggering 1A31 when the theater zone is on. I'll be triggering my A52s in a daisy chain when either the theater or the living room zone is on, because I have speakers in both rooms running off of those 2 amplifiers. And then I have my subwoofer, in-wall subwoofer amplifiers in my rack. That'll be trigger number 3 when only the zone 2 living room zone is on. So I love it. I love 3 triggers. It saved me needing to go over to my Control 4 system to do extra state control and so on. So trigger control can be done either via what they define as the menu or RS-232. I believe this would just state a menu, and then the power can be set to, again, either both zones, zone 2, the main zone, or don't use the trigger at all. And if you wanted, you can also tailor it to specific inputs. Of course, if you customize your set of inputs in the setup here, this list would change also to match that. So you'd get that direct designations and so on. I think in my case, I won't need to use any specific input triggers. Again, it's just 3 different triggers, a couple different sets of amplifiers relative to the zone that's being used. And then we have the last pane here, store loads settings. So you can define user settings that you can save and load. You can have a different set of installer settings that can be saved and load. You can default to factory, and then reset on-the-fly adjustments. Resets all of the on-the-fly adjustments to their default setting. This includes main zone levels, brightness preference, and network settings. So if you made some changes, I guess, and they didn't get committed or whatnot, you could come here and click to have them go back. I've found, generally speaking, that when I click on things in this UI, I get the little pop-up in the bottom right-hand corner where that setting is essentially committed right away. So I'm not sure, I guess, what designates something considered on the fly versus not on the fly. And then lastly, firmware updates, automatic updates. I'll end up turning that on most likely. Beta updates, I'm not sure. We'll see on that. Current version, as I mentioned, and then you can force an update here. Check for updated firmware, no update found, because again, I am already running the latest general release. It did apply an update, so I think it was running like 1.103 or something earlier than that, possibly, when I first fired it up. Now we're at 1.104.144. Back to the main menu. Oh, I don't have that. Didn't have the error message in the bottom right-hand corner. Interesting. Let's go ahead and just turn the zone off. I'm not going to use it. Now there's the error. So there's something related to the state control or power state. In any case, it doesn't seem to be failing, but I'll have to figure that out at some point. So that's the default settings, options, features, capabilities, and so on of the Anthem AVM70 preamp. This thing is looking great. I got the rack gear kit for it. I'm going to be pulling my Marantz AV7704 out very, very quickly, getting this in the rack, getting it wired up, and we'll be back looking at specific setup, options that I'm choosing to use, options that I'm choosing not to use, and so on as we continue to roll down the Home Theater 2.0 upgrade path. So take a look at the past videos. You can get an idea of all the different changes that are going in the system. The Anthem is just one element of essentially a complete gear overhaul in my theater space. So excited for it. This will be driving my living room as well and making some tweaks and such in there. So if you're interested in this, if you're interested in the Anthem, there's something specific you want me to talk about, ask some questions in the comments. I'll make sure to incorporate that in a future video. So thanks so much for watching. Please look down in the description for some ways to support the channel. And absolutely like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications, and come on back for more. Thanks so much.